Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Back to School with TI-84 Technology. My name is Daisy Patches from Texas Instruments and I will be your host for this webinar. It is with delight that I introduce today's presenters, John Baymett from Northern Territory and Melissa Hourigan from Queensland. You probably would have seen them in the PowerPoint presentation, but there's Melissa and here's John.
Good evening all.
Both presenters are classroom practicing teachers and are both very experienced mathematics teachers and, in my opinion, experts with regards to incorporating the TI-84 technology into the classroom. So we should be in for a treat this evening. During this webinar, you may communicate with either myself or the presenters through the Q&A or chat windows, which can be found on the toolbar at the top of your screen. So we look forward to any questions, incoming questions. Well, I think that's about enough from me. Let's get to the exciting stuff. So over to you, Melissa.
Thanks for that, Daisy. I'm just waiting for Daisy so that you can see my desktop.
Yep, should be, yep.
Alrighty. So what we're going to be looking at today, as Daisy has said already, is back to school with the TI-84 technology. What I've got here is a PowerPoint that I've put together. They'll be working through, and Daisy is going to make that available to anybody who would like it after the webinar. And I've also got up on my screen the TI Smart View for the TI-84 Plus, which is the emulator that I use in teaching, and I really like having this up when I'm teaching so that I can demonstrate to the students. They can see the key presses and they can also see what hopefully is on their screen is the same as what's on my screen. So we're going to look at 4 different things today. I'm going to start off by looking at what I call first things first, so making sure that the operating system is up to date. It's, as a teacher, I know very frustrating. You've got a lot of students, although they've all got the same calculator, which is nice, they don't always have the same operating system, which means when you ask them to carry out a task, they may not be able to do that because their operating system's not up to date. So I'm going to look at that and also be demonstrating the Smart View software, as I said, that's on my screen. From there, John is going to look at getting all students on the same page, so resetting the handhelds, making sure students are in the right mode, setting, etc. I will then be looking at doing some tips and tricks with graphing on the TI-84 Plus. And finally, John is going to look at what have been classed, or what we have classed as the top 5 apps to put onto your TI-84 Plus and where to find them, how to install them. So hopefully you'll learn something from a part of this webinar. Even just running through with the practice sessions, John and I have managed to pick up little tips ourselves with it. So, as we said, first things first. What a lot of students and some teachers don't realise is that the calculators are actually like a mini computer, so they do have an operating system. And it's a good idea to make sure check that they're running on the latest operating system, especially, you'll notice in my PowerPoint there, that the current version is 2.55 MP, which is for math print. So to check the operating system, it's a matter of pressing second function and memory and going into the About screen. So this gives them, you can see in my screen there that I'm on 2.55 MP, so I have got the latest operating system. Some students, I went into a class the other day and they were running 2.43, so we did an operating system upgrade. It's also a good idea, a lot of students don't realise that all the calculators have got their own product code there, and that can be very useful as well, and it points them to the TI website. So to do the update, what we need to do is we go to education.ti.com, and from that website, go to downloads. So you'll see in the ribbon across the top, you've got downloads, go to software, or you can go to upgrades. whoops, sorry, go to the software. That gives you the latest information on your Inspire when you're getting that. Sorry about that. In technology, you need to choose that you are doing the TI-84 Plus or TI-84 Plus Silver Edition, and you can choose to just go for the handheld operating system, or if you want to look at other items that are on there, all the other apps, the connectivity software, etc., you can get that. And by clicking on Find, then you have got the information. On this side here, there's just the one operating system. You'll see that actually this was put out in 2011, so it has been out for a little while. Most students that are just buying their TI-84 Plus calculators will most likely have version 2.55 MP, but if they've had it passed down from siblings, they've borrowed it from school, it may not be up to date. What you need to do here is click on where it says operating system. It will take you through to another screen. It shows you a little bit the math print, what it is like. So you'll see that our derivatives are now using the correct math symbolism. Same with integrals, nicely set up there. What we need to do is get the operating system. So by clicking on that, what I usually do is just tell students when this box comes up is just continue as guest. They don't have to have an account. The good thing about having an account is it does track what they've already downloaded. So if they do create an account, have a username and password, it actually keeps their downloads, so they're not going and necessarily downloading again. They can actually just go back and get the information. Once you go through as continue as guest, what you need to be doing then is it is a good idea to save your operating system to your computer. So put it in a folder where you'll be able to find it, save it to your computer, and then open up that from your computer. So you'll see that I've got that information and those screens from the website there showing you that information, and as it says, choose Save to File. So when you then are going to open it up, so you'll go into where you have saved it, open it up. Now there's a couple of different ways that you are able to then transfer it to your calculator. What you do require to do the transfer to the calculator is you require your TI Connect software. TI Connect software is something that we need to make sure that our teachers and our students have on their computers at home or their school computers, and it's a good idea to have it on all of our school computers too, so that if students are doing this upgrade at school, if they're able to, we've got the TI Connect software there. So TI Connect software, again, you can get that from the TI website. It's a free download. They just need to install it. When they have got it installed, what they will notice is when they go to the file that they have saved, it will actually, if they right-click on it, it will ask them, do they want to send to device? So that's one option. The other option, to be able to do the transfer, you need to open up your TI Connect, which I'm just looking for my TI Connect now and have managed to misplace it on my desktop. If you'll just excuse me a moment to find it. Sorry. So you open up your TI Connect software and you'll see that you have the option here to send to TI device. You need to have the device connected, so they will have received with their calculator their USB to mini USB, and you use that to be able to transfer. Just getting everything back up here. Okay, so connect to TI device, open TI Connect, click on Send to Device, making sure that they have the device connected. We then need to click on Browse and find where they've saved their file and select their device. Finally, there is the option at the bottom to send to device, and that will then transfer across for them. Generally, what I will do in a class is I will connect one calculator to my computer, upgrade that one, and then I will have some of the micro USBs to micro USB cables, and I will then get that first student to transfer to another student. From there, you've then got two calculators that are connected. You get both of those to transfer. And this is where you can start talking about a nice little exponential situation, because we started with one. We then transferred, we had two calculators. We then go out from there, we're able to connect 4 calculators from there, and so on up through the line. It is a good idea when you're doing this to have the Smart View going at the same time, and I find to make sure that the students know what to do, to be able to follow through the link process. So in this case, both students need to go to link, which is second function, and then the X key. It is essential to make sure the receiving calculator is set up first. So to do that, once they've gone into the link menu, you right-click and you get receive, and they choose number 1. When they do that, it will then say on their screen, waiting. The other student who has the operating system remains on the send screen. They need to move down through the screens, and they will get to send operating system, which is option G. They will then click on either enter or G. What will then happen is that it will detect the process and will then start to do the transmit process. So what they will then do is hit transmit, and they will get a message that it's been sent across. Once it's sending across, it will actually give a percentage complete information so that the students know how long they've got to wait and they can be watching that. Once you've done that, work through all of your class, then everybody's up to date and you've got the same information, then they've got the same mode information. I'm just going to have to quit my send receive there. Not a good idea to have hit send receive or send there, because my computer is and my SmartView software is actually trying to find a connected calculator. So good idea to get to that stage, but don't actually hit enter, which I've so that you don't end up with your calculator stalling as I have there. Once you've done your class upgrade, good idea to collect back all those USB cables. Students have got it up to date and they're then ready to go ahead with the lessons that you're wanting to do. As I said, I'm using the emulator here. It provides you with the ability to project, so using your data projectors to be able to project up. You'll notice as I was following through with some of the instructions there and pressing the buttons that they were becoming red, so the students are actually able to see the button that I have pressed. You can show a key press history, so you have got that ability there. For any students that you're not sure if they'll be able to keep up, they were late arriving to class, the key press history is there. The other option that you have got as well is to show any of your previous if you're doing graphing, previous screens there. So you've actually got an equation screen, a table screen, and a graph screen. So you can show that. You also have the ability to be able to show the colour version of the TI-84 Plus. So I like this from a demonstration point of view, so that students can actually see that it is actually different coloured lines when you're graphing the various lines. So that's the TI-84C Silver Edition. You will notice, though, it does have a more up-to-date operating system, which is only available for the colour calculators and the colour emulator, because that is obviously the latest of the calculators. So it can be a good idea if you're doing graphing to have different colours there, but generally you go to the TI-84 and that way it's looking the same as what the students have got. As you can see, I've got an error come up on my screen there because I don't have a calculator connected to be able to transmit. Something that I find students need to learn with the 84s as well is if they ever do something whereby they get an error message, it's a good idea to make sure they're instructed to read that error message and to check with the teacher. So this one, if a student says, I've got an error message, error in transmit, it means there's not a calculator connected, there's something gone wrong in the connection. Sometimes you do get of numbers with your error messages, and you can go to where the error is, which can be a good idea as well. So I always advise my students when they are using the 84s and they get an error message, read what it says and read what their options are. Make sure that if there is an option to go to it and find out where that error is, that they do that. So I'll just exit out of that one. So the other part about the emulator is you do have the large screen there as well for the students to be able to see, and if you can imagine projecting that up to the wall, it does mean that they should be able to see quite easily what they should have on their screens. To get out of that, I'm just going to quit that screen, and I'm going to pass over now to John, who is going to take us into our next section and lead us through with making sure that all our students are on the same page. So I'll pass it over to John.
Thanks, Mel. That's fantastic. Here we go. So you should be able to see my screen now. Is that correct, Mel?
Yes, you can see your screen. We're missing a little bit of the calculator, but I think that's just because you've got it set up high, so we only see the keys rather than the screen as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. I'm going to get rid of this in a second anyway. So good evening all. Just following on from what Mel said in terms of putting the operating system onto the calculators, I use it in the classroom as well, and I just have a spare cable in my top drawer that when the kid needs a calculator upgraded, I just get the calculator out and the cable, connect the two via the computer. I don't worry about using TI Connect. I just right-click on the app and it will then send it straight to my TI device, exactly the same. So that's how that works. That's what Mel was talking about. I think TI Connect as well, just another thing on that, is that this is really underutilized. I think that students don't realize that they have it, that it's free. And it's a fantastic thing to help them, especially with their assignments, especially with the TI screen capture, and also being able to transfer data, both from an Excel document onto their calculators and from their calculators onto Excel documents. So I'll save that for another time. Something that Mel and I noticed the other day, so this is where I like my screen to be set up. I can make this bigger, the large screen, but I think that because of the pixels on the 84, which is much chunkier than on the colour version, I think that's about the right size. I also like to have the history bar down the bottom at the same time so students can follow it. I don't like to show much more than this because I think that showing too much history, they get a bit overwhelmed. Maybe 2 lines would be okay, and I can change that by just adjusting it here, and that would give me 2 lines if I wanted to. Something that you may have seen as Mel was scrolling across her calculator is that if, that's the colour again, if she has the top, and you can see that, there you go, it says drag screen. So that's not very useful, obviously, on a blank screen, but if you wanted to produce some documents, some help documents for your students, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, then you can simply have a blank Word document up, and if you go over your screen and drag it across, it will dump the image that you have on your screen straight onto a Word document. And that's a nice little tool, especially, like I said, when you're producing documents for students, and that's exactly the same on the TI-Inspire. Don't save that one. All right. So we talked about all having the same operating system, and the next thing then is all getting the students on the same page, not only with the operating system, but starting a lesson. And regularly we see error messages like this on the screen that students cause errors. So I will show you in a minute how to do an overall sort of a calculator restart sort of program. But before that, I'll show you some of the errors. The main three errors that are going to come up are either to do with stat plots, to do with window, or to do with y equals. So you can see here that this is the first error message that's coming up in the window range. If I go into window, this is quite common for the students to do, where they forget to put the negative in, which will cause an error, or that the min is a greater value than the max. And the other one they sometimes use, they'll use the take away, the subtract button, rather than, and it will still give us that. This is what Mel talked about the go to. So if I go to it, oh yeah, silly me, it's supposed to be negative. If I now go to the graph, it's now saying there's an invalid dim. That's where, although I have information already in my statistics page, in my stat plots, it's trying to plot a scatter plot of list 1 and list 3. And therefore, it doesn't match. There's no data, sorry, my Englishness is coming out in me. There's no information in list 3. So we need to sort that out. Easiest way for now would be just to turn them all off. You can turn them off individually. And let's go to graph now. It did it. I thought I had another error one. The other error one that some students like to do with each other, they like to mess around with each other's screens, is they like to hide, if I can scroll down, they like to hide errors down in here. So they like to hide it on their mates' calculators down here, and when that happens, it will also crash on the same thing. So one way, obviously you need to teach the students how to find all those errors and how to overcome them, especially in test and exam situations. But in a classroom context, if you want all the students on the same page to start with, then you would go second the memory. We're going to go to reset. I'm not big on scrolling down. I'm going to go number 7. It's going to change my view. I prefer this view. And then I'm going to look at both calculator screens. Although I have to say it's easier for me. For some reason, I don't know whether it's habit, but obviously when I'm pressing buttons on the calculator, I'm looking here, so it's sort of habit rather than looking slightly to the right. But I'll stick with this one. We're going to go then to all RAM, and it just gives you a little warning message. Now the only downside of doing this is that if you have some programs that the students have created, it will wipe those clean. So those can be saved by the students using TI Connect, or they can put it onto another calculator, but that's the only downside, is that these programs will get wiped. So we're going to press number 2. Now we can see that all your students will be on the same page. The window will all be the same. The y equals will all be clear. All the plots are off. And the statistics will also be clear. So we're all starting on exactly the same page. And that's a great way to start with your students. So with the new operating system, Mel said it was updated a while ago, but I still think there's quite a few things that maybe we're not aware of. Or some people, there's always little tricks, like Mel said earlier, that we learn from each other. On the mode screen, this is pretty much the same, if not the same, as the old operating system. But if I scroll up, a bit lazy rather than scrolling down, we can see we have much more choices in here. The stats wizard is worth having on, and that will do automatically the default for it. The stats wizard is like the old catalogue help that we used to have. So we definitely would like that on to help us rather than have to remember the syntax. on how to do questions like in LinReg and apps like that. The stat diagnostics, we used to have to go into catalog and turn the diagnostics on. Once it was on, it stayed on, but we'll turn that on because that will give us our R and R squared much easier. I'm not going to worry about going to the format of graph, and then depending on what class you've got and what students, you can decide whether you want to have it on auto for the answers or whether you want to switch between decimals and fractions. So we get out of that. One of the really nice things is that we can scroll up, and we can scroll up. Now I can't scroll up because I've wiped everything clean. Should have realised that one, shouldn't I? So if I had some values in here, obviously we can do 5 times the previous answer. That was one of the ways we used to do it. But it's quite nice now that if you want to go up, either to copy a value down, we can do, or if you want to copy an expression down, then we can do, and it will continue to work as normal. That's a really nice function. In terms of on top of the copying, if you want students to remember a number further up without having to scroll up to find it, then the store button is really useful. So if you did have a convoluted number, and I would only do a very basic one like the number 5, we can store that as any letter we like. Best to explain to the students not to store it as either X or Y, as those will get overwritten when they go into the graphing screen and do something on the graphing screen. So we'll just choose, let's go A, and until it gets written overwrote on this one, or you do a reset again, A will always be 5. And that doesn't affect the calculating what the students are doing unless they do a calculation, etc. I find this one really useful when students are having to sub a number into an equation. Sometimes they'll make mistakes, especially with negatives or squareds. So if you get them to store the variables first and then just type the equation in, they were very unlikely to make a mistake. Obviously not showing any workings out on their screen, but they're unlikely to make a mistake. The other main area that has been upgraded is that the function keys are now used to access those alpha F1. And we can see that in the first one we have lots of fractions that we can now have access to because we've got it now in maths print, like the TI-84 XP. And if I go to number 2, I can then type in a fraction, and that's all well and good. It will also convert it to a top-heavy fraction. I can either go via math or back to here again. And if I wanted to convert it to a decimal, it will do that for me. I can keep pressing enter and it will convert it back. Or if I wanted to, I could also keep converting. And this is quite useful. We have a class set of TI-84s, and I take this in sometimes with my middle school students. They're not required to buy them at that age, but we use them with middle school students and get them to look at relationships between the fractions they're doing. And I find that quite useful as well. What else do we have? In F2, this is when I show my students this one, especially the senior students, they can't believe it and are so excited that they've got all this here now, ranging from a log with a base. So that makes their life a lot easier in terms of typing these the logs with different bases rather than 10 into their calculator and not having to remember extra things. But especially, as Mel showed earlier, the derivative or the integral, and very easy to use. And really nice to use in the y equals equation as well when you want students to differentiate a graph. So if we have 5x cubed, make sure that we come down from up there, plus 3x, and I want to find the derivative when x is 2. Enter. There we are. Very nice. Using those same functionalities in a few other areas, we could also go into stats, and if we had some data in here, let's just randomly type some numbers in, or loosely, and let's say that they're roughly, doesn't really matter, double, 9.8, let's go 12.3. If we're going to do a regression equation for this, then we could out of this mode stats, across to calculate a linear regression. Or we can see now, because we've got it in Stats Wizard, a much nicer screen to show the students. Yep, that's where my X list is. Yep, that's where my Y list is. Is there a frequency? No, there's not for this one. Again, you have to remember the syntax for here, but I want to also store that as a regression equation. So I want it to be, I don't want to have to copy it across myself. I want the calculator to do it all for me. So I'm going to store that in the Y equals area. I'm going to store it in Y1. Again, we used to have to go via vars, but if we go to F4, we can see that there's Y1. And now calculate. And there's all the information for my linear regression. How about that? There's a chance of that happening. Wow. Sorry. Just me that's interested in that one. Right, where are we? There's our R and R squared, because we've got the diagnostic on as well through the mode. It's automatically put it into Y1, and it's also going to graph it as well. The points aren't there, as I haven't got it on in stat plot, but I can put those on, and that's the line of best fit. Now, again, some students may want to or would like to use those numbers, scrolling up, that they've got from here. And every variable that comes up on the calculator, students can access. So if we go into vars, down to statistics, number 5, and scroll across, we will see some of the variables that are used in that lin reg. So if we typed in 2, it will come up with that number that was already from earlier. With my students, I encourage them then to store that as, let's say, capital A, so then they can easily access that and they don't have to worry. And making notes either on their papers or on the exam paper of where what that variable is saved under. The other advantage, going back to calculus, if we look here now at number 4, we're going to do an integral, let's say, between 1. I'm just using the arrow keys to move them. Yes, I could type an equation in here, but I've already got an equation in my y equals, so why don't I just use that one? Oh, that's interesting. Mel, do you see that?
I'm seeing that on your screen. Obviously, your computer decided not to operate.
Let's hope that that's not going to worry me too much. Let's go back. So here, y1 with respect to x, and I missed the enter button, and there will be the answer. If we wanted to, we could go and draw that as well on the graph, but there we go, very easy done using the y1 button. Equally, I could have, just to finish on this, used, and you obviously wouldn't use this mathematically, it doesn't really make any sense, the value I stored, and it also will give me an answer. Well, I think, for now, that is all I would like to show you for there. Mel, can you think of anything else that we discussed?
No, that was pretty much all, I think, for making sure that students are on the same page, making sure they've got their modes set up right, so, yes.
Okay, I'll pass back over to you, Mel. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, John. I'll just share my desktop. So now we have gone through making sure that basically the students' calculators are set up and also making them aware of what is available. Sometimes it's a good idea to do that at the beginning of the year. We can then refresh them as we're teaching. The other option is to obviously be teaching various parts as you're approaching them and needing to use them. Something else that I've done, just as a side mention, it can help students and help the teacher to check that students are understanding and even using the calculator effectively, is I have done a, oh my goodness, now I've forgotten the name of it, where you go searching for various things, so a bit like a Scavenger Hunt. So, and if you go to the TI website and put in Scavenger Hunt under where you can get resources from, so if you go into teachers, go into, say, Resource Centre. I'm hoping this will come up here, and put in Scavenger Hunt. Fingers crossed. And there is, they've picked up one that's the Hunt for Angles. But I know on the American version of the website, so you'll see here that I've got the Australian version of the website. So obviously Australian, it is linked to our Australian curriculum. But what you can do is if you click on Site and you can choose United States, what you are able to do is go into all activities there. And if you do a search, and I'm hoping it will come up here, except I haven't spelt it correctly.
Slight typo, Mel.
There we go. You can, even with the typo, it's managed to pick it up for me. So there are actually scavenger hunts on there, so graphics calculator scavenger hunt, and what they are in the activities there is it gives the students a list of things, and they've got to put in the keystrokes for how to get to that, and it just gets them to look at various things that they can do on the calculator. So I found, and that can be a good end-of-year item. It can be a very good start to, in my school, students have to buy their own 84 Plus for Year 11 and 12. In Year 10, we've taken the 84s in. We've got a class set that we take in occasionally. And so it can be a good way to finish off the year with the 10s and to start the year with the Year 11s, to get them back into that thought process of using the calculator and looking for things. So that's something else that's available as well, just as a side. I'm just going to go back to my Australian site there. So the next thing that I'm going to look at is the tips and tricks in graphing. I'm not sure if there are many of the tricks as such, but just a few things to make sure that we go through and show the students, and it's essential, as I said, for us with Year 11s that are not used to having their own calculator, that we do go through a lot of this information at the beginning of the year, but also as you're working through it. So if you go through this at the beginning of the year and then you're not doing graphing for the first couple of weeks, but then you want them to use their calculators for doing graphing and analysing graphs, etc., then it's a good idea to just give them a refresher with that. So in the PowerPoint, you'll see that starting with the real basics, and that is if they go into y equals, this is where they can enter their functions in. You'll notice that I've got a function in there already, so I'm happy with that one. I can click enter and it will allow me to put in a second function. I can have another function in there, and this is where using the colour in your Smart View comes in very handy because you can have them in different colours. What they then need to do, or what they can do, I'll just go back up to that previous one, is if they use the left-hand arrow, and I think I've actually, oh no, I did get it right. If they go left-hand arrow and go across, you can actually change the line type you've got, so that if you are getting the students to enter 2 or 3 equations or functions in there to graph, they can have the first one as the thin line. By pressing enter, see we've now got a thicker line there, so if they use that one. You can also do shading above the function or shading below the function. There is then a couple of different options. So this one shows up as dashes and circles. This one's just the circles going along, and that one's the separated dashes there. So you've got options there. So if, for example, I leave this one in that form, I'm just going to go back. What we can also do while I've got my cursor on the equal sign there is if I press enter and then I'll go down, that is actually unselecting that particular function, so that if I put in a function here, if I put in 3x plus 4, when I go to graph, I'm only getting my 3x plus 4. I go back to y equals, you'll notice that my y2 has got the box over top of the equal sign. I'm back on y1. I need to go back onto the equal sign and press enter. It's now selected. I'm going to go down to y2 and press enter there and deselect. So when I hit graph, now I'm just getting my quadratic that I had in there. So there are ways for the students to have more than one function, but only look at one function on their screen instead of having them all show up there. So that's another option there. So we're in our y equals. I'm just going to go down and delete out my second one there. So I've just used the clear button to delete the entire line. If I just want to remove one term, that's when I use delete. So I've got my function here. I'm going to go back up, just make my line back to the standard line. The next thing I always get students to do, and we need to, I believe as a teacher, make sure students are thinking about what type of function, where it should appear on our Cartesian plane. So looking at that, I know I've got an intercept of -1, so I know that I need to have my window going down to -1. So it's then getting the students to check their window. Now most times we can have it in the standard window, or the default window as it's called, which is your -10 to 10. However, depending on their functions, if they had a -15 at the end of their function there, they're not going to see the bottom of their parabola where it crosses our y-axis, so they need to adjust it. The other thing that we've got in this new operating system as well is you'll notice with the arrow down the bottom next to the X-res, so I'll do as John does. Instead of scrolling down, I'll just hit up, and it's not going to let me. Sorry, John, I can't do it. I have it down. There we go. I'm trying to use your little tip, and it didn't work. What we do have down the bottom here is the delta X. So you'll see at the moment it's set as 0.212. That means when we're going to be tracing, if we're going to trace on our graph screen, that's the increment that the X is going up in. If I actually change that to 1 and then go to my graph, you will see that it has changed my screen, but also if I hit trace, although we're not going to see it very well because of the graph, you will see that my X value goes up in increments of 1. If I go back and go into my standard window, so I'm going to go from -10 to 10 here, what you will notice, if I go back down, is in that screen it is going to go up in increments of 0.21. So when I press graph and then press trace, you will see that the X value is going up in those increments. So you can adjust that so that it can work up in increments of 1, which is, in many cases for our students, a lot easier to work with and a lot more user-friendly, a lot more acceptable rather than going up in the decimals that they're going up in. So that's something in your window screen that we've now got access to, is that delta X at the bottom of the screen, so we can change our increments there. The next thing that I was going to have a look at that to use, and I think sometimes some people use it really well. I know I get a little bit lazy sometimes and forget to use it, but that's the zoom button. So in Zoom, some of the ones that, when John and I were talking, that are very useful ones, your Zoom standard, number 6 there, does take you back to your -10, 10, so your default Cartesian plane. If you go down, and the reason I'm going down rather than John's option is to just show you a few of the others there. Zoom Stat and Zoom Fit come in handy to make sure Zoom Fit actually puts the graph on your screen. So if the students put in a function in y equals, when they press graph, they go, miss, I don't have any graph here, where's it gone? If you do Zoom Fit, it'll fit it to the screen. Zoom Stat comes in handy when you're doing your stat plots. And the other one that comes in handy for your higher level students, just going back up, is option number 5, which is Zoom Square or Z Square. And that's particularly good if you're getting students to draw a circle on their Cartesian plane to actually make it look like a circle. So if they've put in their circle function, if they haven't got Zoom Square selected, their circle will actually look a bit elliptical. So that's another one that they need to be made aware of there. If they go second function and press the window button, they'll get table setup. With table setup, what this is doing is it's actually linking what they've got in their graph to a table, and that way when they go second function graph, it is actually giving them their list of values for that particular function. So the x and y values, in this case I've only got one function, which is y1, but there's my y values for it. And that's what, if as a teacher you have these 3 screens available, you can actually show the function, you can show their table of values, and you can show the graph all in one for the students to see. On their calculators, they have to go between them, so they get there from pressing graph, pressing second graph, which gives them table, and then they've also got the y equals there. Now, the other thing too that you're able to do is if you quit out of the graph, because we have got values in this table here, what we can actually do is press alpha y. When we press enter, that is actually at the last value that I had the cursor on my graph screen. So if I go back to my graph screen and press trace, you'll see there's my y value of 1.299, 1.3. When I have got y, that's its last value that I had in the trace function there. So, and you can do that as well with x, when I can find x, there it is. And that's our x value from my last screen as well. So those are just little tips and tricks that you can use there when you are in your graphing and you have gone to trace, so you can see that information there. The students are able to take those 2 variables and their values and put them back into their main screen, their calculator screen, to do calculations with it. The last thing that I have decided to have a look at here is when you're in the graph screen, is that we also have access to the draw menu. And I think this is something that's perhaps not done, sorry, it's second last because I'm going to do the calc menu as well. But in the draw menu, which is second function, and then the program button, you can draw tangents to your function. So if I choose 5, I can choose where I'm going to draw the tangent. So I press enter, and you'll see it has drawn my tangent. It is telling me that it's drawn a tangent at x equals 0.851, and it's also giving me that function. So the equation or the function of the tangent for this one at 0.85, it is 4.4x minus 2.45. So it's giving you the equation of the tangent at that point. What you're able to do is obviously move around and draw tangents at various points. so that when you are looking at your differentiation, you can show students exactly when we're differentiating, this is what we're getting. You're able to also shade in parts. To remove that tangent line, you'll see option number 1 is clear draw. So you choose number 1, it redraws the function, and we no longer have our tangent there. The last thing here you'll see on my PowerPoint is second function and the trace button, which gives us the calc menu. So that's how we can do various calculations with our graph. We can find a point of intersection. Because I haven't got a second function in there, I won't do that at the moment. But I can, for example, find my zeros. So I want to find my zeros, and I want to find the intercept in the negative. Now there's 2 options here with left bound, so we have to tell it where, the calculator, where to look for this information. What you can do is use your cursor, move across as one option, or the other option is you can actually type in a value. So I might put in there -2. You'll see it types the x, -2. I press enter. It asks for my right bound. I'm going to put in x equals 0 for my right bound. I press enter. You can ask the students to put a guess in here. You can choose to just ignore that and press enter. And you will see that it has found my x-intercept at -1, 0. Okay, so that's providing the coordinates there. You can do the same thing with finding your minimum. So I find my minimum by choosing number 3. My left bound, I'm going to put in -1. My right bound, I'll put in 1. So I know that my minimum is falling between these 2 points. For guess, I just ignored that, and I've now got my minimum value there. We can also, while we are in the graph screen, choose to go alpha and option number 2, F2, and I can do the derivative, so I can choose 3. You'll see it has gone back to our calculator screen. So I want the derivative of x. I'm going to put in for y1 because that's my function. I'm going to go across, and I will choose the derivative at the point x equals 1. And it's given me the value 5. If I was to go back to my calc menu, my draw menu, choose number 5, tangent. Apologies here. I'm going to go back to my graph. Now go into my draw menu. Choose number 5. What I want is at x equals 1. And when I press in enter, it's giving me my gradient there of 5, which is what my derivative gave me back on my calculator screen, which is 5 there. So there's a few little shortcuts there that we are able to use now that we've got the upgraded operating system, and for when we're going into our classes now, and using, as I said, the having our derivatives look the way our students are writing them in class, having our integrals look that way instead of having the term derived there, I think is going to be of great benefit to the students. John, did you have anything more you wanted to add with the graphing?
Perfect, I would say. I learned a lot there, so thank you for that.
Okay, I'll pass back over to John, and he's going to look at now the top 5 apps for use in class. So my desktop is now across. It's all yours, John.
Thanks, Mel. I'm sorry to hear you've got a bit of a croaky voice there. Thanks for doing tonight.
Oh, that's all right. Yes, came down with it, and it's wonderful teaching this afternoon, losing my voice, thinking this is going to sound really bad on the webinar, so I will apologise to people for my voice.
Well, that was lovely. All right, just to finish it and just quickly, most of the apps that you'll need are already installed in the apps function. I haven't tried this. I'm sure if I go this, I think it'll go, may try and do it. There we go. There's a lot already installed on this one here that students can access. They do like to change the languages sometimes, or maybe that's just my students, so just be mindful of that. But most of the apps are already on there.
Just interrupting you, John, something that I do tell my students to do, exactly as you said, they'll change it to a different language to annoy their friends. But if they're needing a little bit more space on their calculator, they can go into their memory and they can actually delete out some of those language apps. So you can, with your memory management number 2 there, you can actually delete out some of the apps. So if they don't want, for example, study cards in French, they can actually go in there and delete it out. So it can provide them, and same thing there, cell sheet, don't particularly want to have it necessarily in German or Spanish, so you can actually select it to be deleted in some cases. Some of the apps need to remain there, but it is something that they can do to free up a bit of space on their calculator too.
Great
Sorry,
comment.
John, to you.
No, I thought it was a great comment. I agree completely. Thank you. So to get those apps, we can get those apps from the TI website, and if you go into Downloads and Software, there's the operating system that Mel talked about earlier. If I go to the TI-84, I could be a bit more selective about which apps I want to look at, but I'm not going to bother. Then we can see that these are all the apps that are available for my students to put onto their handhelds. We'll talk about the top 5 in a second. What I then do is I then save them onto, again, a folder either on my desktop or on my account at work and both at home, and then simply to put onto the student's calculator when they connect up with the USB to mini USB cable, just right-click it and it'll straight send it to their device. And as Mel showed you with the operating system, they can do it from handheld to handheld exactly the same. All right, so what are our top 5? Well, we would say, and Daisy will make this document available for you, we would say that these are our top 5 apps. First one, we would say, I'm just going to move the icon out of the way, I can't quite see, is the polynomial root finder and simultaneous equation. This is the one that probably my students use the most, and from talking about NT in South Australia only, in terms of the exam situation, the exam setters are aware that this app is on the calculators. They expect students to use it, so they'll set up questions accordingly, either in terms of difficulty or equally in terms of the number of marks that is awarded. But this app will solve any polynomial or any simultaneous equation, and if we get time, we may have a quick look at that. This will be my number 2 app, like I'm doing countdown here. An inequality, I use this a lot with my method students in year 12 when they're using linear programming. It's a fantastic one to use in terms of getting them to see the visual and also being able to find the intersects and storing those as lists.
The students do need to make sure they get out of that app though if they're going in and not going to be doing inequalities, because otherwise every time they go to draw a graph they'll end up with inequalities. And
Mel's ruining all my thunder here now, because I've already got this set up that it will actually come up on here. So, or you led me into it, sorry Mel. It's already set up on here, and yes, if they don't turn this one off, the inequalities one, it will stay there. They can still use everything the same, but students sometimes don't like to have all this, and sometimes it happens they don't realise what's going on here. So they can simply go into app, find the inequalities one. You could scroll down, but again, I can't be bothered. Control Alpha I to find inequalities, and we can then turn that one off and quit it. So now if I go back into Y equals, it's now out of inequality screen. Thanks, Mel. Also, Cabri Junior, just like the Cabri that you have access to on other platforms, This is a slightly simplified version. I find this really useful with my middle school students, especially if I don't have access to the computer room or iPads and I want students to have a go at something else. This is a nice way to actually access that. While we're on that, when you've downloaded it, so if we look here, there it is. Not only do you have the actual app itself, but you also have the guidebook. And although it looks it's quite big, it's a fantastic resource for you to, if you have time, to look through and to learn some other things specifically about Cabri Junior, how it works on the TI-84. There's also other webinars that you could get access to and other support documents. If you did want other support with things like Cabri Junior, then what you can do is go to classroom activities and actually do a search for activities that involve that app that you're looking for. So we're talking about the TI-84. I'm therefore now going to go to the advanced search because I want to find some activities that are specific to that app. And down here we can see that, I'm just going to put it back onto the 84 again. I could be more specific about other things that I'm going to use, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to go to the apps, and there's Cabri Junior. And if I do a search on this, then there are 11 documents and resources that I can actually access already made for me that revolve around the Cabri Junior. So I don't need to create everything myself, and this will be sport. And here's the charming man himself. He's listening hopefully tonight. I've seen him, he's logged on. Peter Fox, this is Peter Fox's one on Cabri Junior. And if we click on that, then there's the files that we can download, a PDF document that then will work with that Cabri Junior. Going back to our top 5, 2 more to go. Bernier Easy Data, again it's on most of your handhelds anyway, but this is fantastic. And now with the Easy Data, when you plug in, let's say, the CBR or CBR2 or a temperature probe using the mini USB, then it will come up automatically on the screen. You don't have to go through a long-winded way to find it. It will literally come up on the screen and really easy to use. I think that using the probes in maths classroom and definitely in science classroom really enriches what the students are doing with their learning on different areas. And like with the CBR, you've already got, again, many resources already available, like ball bounce, which is a favorite of mine, and the motion one, motion match, where the students have to walk a certain graph that's already made, either a distance time graph or a velocity time graph. And I use that a lot, not only in my teaching, especially with differentiation, but also with my younger years. And also it's a fantastic one to use in a parents' evening and get the parents to do it and see how they go walking that journey and actually have it up on the smart screen. And this is probably my last one of the top 5, is the probability simulation. Again, I get a bit annoyed after a while, and I'm sure the kids do, of rolling a dice so many times or tossing a coin or things like that. And this app allows this to happen so quickly, and for the students to see what happens when they increase the number of trials, if they make trials biased. And therefore I would say those are my top 5. So just very quickly to finish, if we wanted to go into one of those, we simply go to apps. I want to go to the polynomial root finder, so I'm going to go alpha p. There it is there, no number next to it, and it tells me everything I need to do to solve a polynomial. We'll do a quadratic. Notice these are now, and this is why perhaps in this view it's not as clear for the students to see, but in this view it links nicely with the function keys. Next, it's a quadratic, 5, 3. Make students use the negative button, 4, press solve, and there we have it. And I think that is more than enough time on this. Well, not more than enough time on this, but I think that with the time that it is, we'll stop there and I'll pass back to Daisy, unless Daisy or Mel, there's anything else you want me to add to that?
No, I think that's great.
Okay, I'll pass back to Daisy. Daisy, all yours.
I think while we're waiting for Daisy to pick up there, if there are any questions...
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Well done. I really enjoyed that, particularly the top 5 apps.
I think I need to have some music next time, like a little bit of a drum roll or something, so we can count down like the radio.
Exactly, exactly. Well, thank you, basically, everyone. Like all good things, they all come to an end, and so is tonight. I certainly learned a lot about the 84 technology. Thank you, John and Melissa, for a fabulous webinar.
You are most welcome.
I appreciate particularly you, Melissa, with a bit of a sore throat. That must have been a challenge.
I just have to be quiet tonight so the kids won't hear me talking.
Thank you to you, the audience, for participating. Tomorrow you'll receive an email from us that will actually contain the webinar certificate link, and in addition to that, you'll also get the resources that both Melissa and John mentioned during the session. We hope that you enjoyed today's webinar, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thanks again, and